got to talk about CNN today. Yeah. Because I was a little surprised. I'm not going to lie. I was a bit surprised. Now, this is a little bit of a longer video. So sit back, relax. Okay. It's going to be a little while. Like, share, comment, hit that subscribe button if you are new. And let's dive in.
Victory speech, overwhelming results in South Carolina. We called it right at the top of the hour as soon as the polls closed. Back to the team here in New York. Listen, you've heard a lot of Trump speeches?
Yeah, I mean, RIP the Reagan GOP. There's something so jarring about watching Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott, all of who condemned him after January 6th, lining up to do their best campaign rally impersonation and saying this is the most qualified man to be president.
The night of January 6th, Lindsey Graham was saying he was,
I'm done with
him.
Enough.
Yeah,
I mean, listen, it is the greatest political comeback in history. Just 3 years ago, he was done in the party, and it only took a matter of months before he came back and handily won in Nikki Haley's home state. The question now becomes
the greatest political comeback in history. The greatest. And listen, I might agree. Okay? Because, yeah, Trump has a floor. Trump has a group of individuals who will never leave, which Joe Biden doesn't have. Joe Biden doesn't have true supporters. He has people that hate Trump, so they vote for him instead. There's nobody really out here rocking Biden merch. When's the last time you saw people rocking some Biden Kamala merch, right? Trump made the red hat iconic. Absolutely iconic. When you see a red hat on somebody, you don't even have to see the front. But in the back of your mind, you automatically assume, oh yeah, that's a Trump supporter. That's the red hat. He made that iconic. What is Joe Biden made iconic? The 94 crime bill? Come on now, bro. It's not even close. Not even close. But part of the reason for his comeback was because people realized what the establishment was doing to him. Right? And this is the thing that I said previously. And I'm surprised he didn't learn from the first time, because we've checked out a video about this as well. Trump grew the more that they talked about him. The more that they tried to bash him, the higher he went. Right? They laughed at Trump the first time. Oh, Trump can't win, blah, blah, blah. Trump this, Trump that, Trump this, Trump that. And he ended up winning. And this time, oh, Trump this, Trump that, Trump indictment, Trump indictment, Trump indictment, Trump indictment, Trump indictment, Trump indictment, right? It just, and I'm just like, yo, y'all just don't learn your lesson. You could have just shut up. You could have just sat back and been quiet, didn't say anything about Trump, just ignored him. Just ignored him. Which, honestly, I feel like that would have been, or is, the best strategy in order to beat Trump. It's just to ignore him. Act like he's not even there. Don't talk about him. Don't try to, oh, Trump bad, right? Oh, Trump heavy racist, blah, 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 blah. Because now you got people like me that will come out and disprove that. Now you're giving me an opportunity to showcase these types of things. Now you're making people look into, oh, is Trump actually a bad guy? Actually he isn't. They're lying to me, right? They could have just sat back and been quiet. And maybe Joe Biden wouldn't have too much of an issue right now. But what do y'all think? Let me know.
This. She's held on. We'll see where the margins break down tonight to about just under a third of Republican votes in some of these primaries. How many of those votes will go to Donald Trump? Because he will need those in a general election. Some of those are never going to be with him, but how many is the open question now?
Look, I mean, for me, Tim Scott is obviously auditioning to be vice president. And every time Trump just ritually humiliates him, talks about him having low energy, makes fun of his campaign, and then Tim Scott gets out there and he tries to do something that's really not natural to him, and then he walks off. But, we were talking about before, this is kind of the pathway that Pence got on. And so you might not just be watching the resurrection of a Tim Scott, but you might also be watching the rise of a resurrection of Trump, the rise of Tim Scott.
I cannot think.
Hold on, you mean like Kamala did when Kamala went at Joe Biden? Y'all remember that? Okay. And then she cozied up to him later on to be his vice president. So again, what's like they say this stuff as if Democrats haven't already done it. You know, oh, Tim Scott is cozying up to Trump. Oh my goodness. Well, Kamala cozied up to Joe Biden. Didn't Kamala call Biden a racist at one point during their debates? You know, when they were going at each other, but she cozied up to him later on to be his vice president. But y'all don't talk about Kamala like that. Oh, I forgot. If you're a Democrat, it's okay. If you're a Republican, bad people. How ridiculous.
Of a Republican that I want to be vice president more than Tim Scott.
Sure.
We love Tim Scott. Yeah. All Republicans of all stripes love Tim Scott. And I agree with what Donald Trump said. I think he's a good man.
Yes.
And I think he's a humble man. And I want him to do whatever he has to do to get this job. I really do, because I think
you're in luck.
He does seem willing.
You should feel good.
Your wish will be granted, sir.
You all are down on what is going on here, but politics has become performative, and he is doing what he has to do. And if he is on this ticket, Republicans are going to love it. They're going to love it. So I'm glad to see him going all around.
Tim Scott is
Also, part of me wants to say no to Tim Scott just because they're all for Tim Scott. You know, I feel like there's something I'm missing about Tim Scott. But, you know, regardless of that, put that aside, I should say. I don't mind a Tim Scott vice presidency. I don't mind it. Now, once you bring back in, you know, let's bring back in the CNN equation. That gives me a cause to pause, right? That makes me think maybe there's something I'm missing. Is Tim Scott more establishment, right? There was speculation that Tim Scott was going to be the establishment pick. And maybe the establishment did pick him for a while and, you know, tested the waters and saw, okay, no, we don't believe this guy can do it. Let's pivot. Okay. Let's pivot a little bit, move around here. Who else can we prop up? You know, so that does give me a cause to pause. It really does. But it also, at the same time, it you know, gets my gears spinning, and it makes me think, could that help bolster Trump to a win, right? By having Tim Scott as a vice president, you know, because my thing is, I want to win, which I'm sure you guys have realized that already. I want to win. I am a competitor at heart, and I want to win. Forget about the, oh man, we need to do this instead and do. No, I want to win. We can talk about all the rest of the stuff later once Trump is back in office. But I want to win. I want to win. Simple and plain. I don't think this country could handle another 4 years of Joe Biden and this administration. We will be finished. Okay? So I want to win. And it does make me think, maybe Tim Scott does give Trump an even better chance to win than he already has, which Trump is already up in every single poll. Basically every single poll. So if you can bolster that even more, hey, great. I don't think you should go with a controversial figure like a Ron DeSantis, right? And I'm sure some of you guys are like, wait, controversial? Listen, I told you guys, I read through social media, okay? And I've shown you guys the comments on social media. I've made several videos on this. And, you know, when I look at political posts, and we're going to get back to this video, but I want to make this point. When I look at political posts, there's two names that I always see mentioned on the Republican side, and that's Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. Not so much DeSantis anymore, but when DeSantis was campaigning, you know, it was Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. I've never seen Nikki Haley, which I showed you guys that in one video. I was not lying. I showed it to you. Now, one time did Nikki Haley's name pop up anywhere? You saw a lot of Trump. You saw some of Ron DeSantis sprinkled in there. Okay, you saw nothing of Nikki Haley, which all that leads to a whole nother point. But I'll spare you guys from that one. But always when it's Ron DeSantis, it's negative. Every single time, it's negative. It's, you know, he's a terrible person. Which, hey, regardless of whether you feel that is true or not, which I don't believe it's true, that's what the people believe. Right? Most of the people believe about Ron DeSantis. So I don't feel like that would be a great pick for Trump just off that reason alone. Because at the end of the day, we got to win. We can talk about, oh, yeah, Democrats are trying to push this false narrative, blah, 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 blah. Hey, well, that false narrative is working with Ron DeSantis. I'm going to tell you that. It is working. With Trump, it's not. So that's why Trump is good. But maybe Tim Scott is the guy. I don't know. Who do you guys think should be Donald Trump's vice president? Let me know in the comment section.
I firmly believe Tim Scott is a good man.
Yes.
I've said that many times before. My line about Tim Scott is that I would give Tim Scott a kidney if he asked me, but I'd never vote for him, right? But the person that Tim Scott has become while auditioning, you call it auditioning, I'd probably call it something else if I was just talking to Audie and Van and we were in a room by ourselves. But what he's doing right now.
Well, that sounded negative. If he was in a room with some black folks by themselves, by himself, he would call them something different. It's okay if they do it, but if Republicans do it, oh, it's a problem. It's okay if he says, oh, I would call him a terrible name, probably starting with the C, or Uncle T, right, which is also false, but I'll spare you guys that whole story. It's okay for him to call names, but if a Republican did it, oh my goodness, oh. Okay, all right.
Is embarrassing. And I think this is not the Tim Scott that we know. But you also see this happen with many men and women who actually find themselves in this Trump orbit. I mean, this is not who Lindsey Graham, we knew Lindsey Graham to be before.
He wouldn't even show his face in Munich this time, after years and years going with John McCain to the conference that celebrates the NATO alliance. He wouldn't even show up.
And thank you. That bolsters the point that I'm making. And you're seeing a shell of who Tim Scott really is. He's not the rah-rah, this is Trump country, woo-ha, let's go do this. I mean, and at the end of the day, I mean, what does he get from this? I mean,
maybe the vice presidency.
Maybe, but if he misses, what is he, HUD director?
Or U.S. Senator from South Carolina and one of the most respected Republicans in the country.
But he's losing.
He's
losing. No, not either way. My point, and I think Van's point and everybody else's point, is that you're losing respect day by day by going out here and auditioning.
There is a segment of lifelong Republicans who are mortified by what Tim Scott's doing. We are definitely the minority. You're absolutely right, Scott. But there are some of us who are like, we thought you were one of the good ones. We thought you were going to tell the truth. I want to know his answer to certifying the election question. That's fundamental.
Subjugation is the toll you have to pay when you enter Trump's world. You have to subjugate yourself. The whole party is subjugating itself to Donald Trump.
Yeah, which is why, I understand the point about making it it's embarrassing that there's a black guy doing this. A lot of white guys are doing it too, right? And on Alyssa's point, I agree with that. I know a lot of conservatives and Republicans who wince when they see some of, particularly the New Hampshire victory speech thing where he came on and after Vivek Ramaswamy and really did not cover himself in glory. Where I disagree a little bit with Alyssa and where I think it's sort of significant here that Nikki Haley stays in is I really think the future of American politics is going to be the future of factions. And I miss the days, we were better off when the Democratic Party had really strong and robust competing factions where they had to negotiate with each other. Republican Party desperately needs that. What Nikki Haley staying in the race does, I mean, there are a lot of things it does, but one of the things it does is it solidifies and gives permission structure for a big chunk of the Republican Party to be a non-Trump faction. And since Trump is not going to appoint a single person in his second administration to be a check on him, not one, who could successfully do it. There are going to be no Barrs and Kellys or any of that kind of people. The only way to hold him in check is to have a constituency in the Republican Party that will punish senators and congressmen who don't push back on some of the crazy.
Can I ask a question, though? But can she actually do that, or is she the leader or creator of this mold that's a faction? If, for example, tonight, to David's point, she doesn't even do well in the 1st Congressional District, which is the most moderate, which is it's Charleston, it's Berkeley, it's Dorchester, it's where you would think somebody like Nikki Haley can do well. If she gets bludgeoned there, and then disregard the rest of the state, can she be the leader of this?
Yes, sir. My only point, pushing back on what Alyssa said when she said RIP to the Reagan GOP, my point is it's sort of like Miracle Max. It's only mostly dead. And the way you build it back is by building up a faction like this.
Can I get a couple of points? I want to ask you a question, but, I
want to address this faction thing. There is no serious faction. There is no serious faction. The people that are supporting Nikki Haley are Democrats. They're people that are independents that weren't going to support Trump anyway, right? So we're not talking about, a serious portion of the Republican Party. Not at all. Not by a long shot, in my humble opinion. Anybody that supports Nikki Haley, I think I'm really confused, right? Any person that considers himself a real Republican, I'm really confused, right? Hey, listen, it's a free country. You can support who you want to support, obviously, and I support that. You should be able to do so, right? I'm not against people supporting who they want to support. I'm just saying the decision in and of itself, I'm a little confused by. Why exactly are you supporting Nikki Haley over Trump? Huh? So you're basically supporting a Joe Biden in heels? Because, I mean, if you look at them, in terms of policy, her and Joe Biden are basically the same. Basically the same. They might differ on like one issue. That's about it. So are we really talking about true Republicans here? I don't think so. And then you could get into, all of the money that's been put behind her as well to try to drum up support. I showed you guys that in a previous video. She had spent nearly $15 million in ads in South Carolina. 15 million. I think it was like 14.8 if I remember correctly. You know how much Trump spent on ads in South Carolina? Like 1 million. So 15-1, and she still lost. And she outspent Trump 15-1 on ads. Yeah. And we're not even going to talk about the historic numbers that Trump had in terms of the people that came out and supported him and voted for him. He had over 400,000 people, which was a record. If you combined the number of people that voted for Nikki Haley with the number of people, with the number of people that voted for Joe Biden, it still did not equal what Trump got. Trump was like at 450. If you combine Nikki Haley and Joe Biden's number, it was like 415 or something. It was like the low 400s. Still did not trump Trump's numbers, right? I was on the right line with that, right track with that. Still did not outbeat Trump with both of their numbers combined. Now, granted, yes, sure, it's primary, blah, blah, blah. Not a lot of people participated, but I think it's worth noting. He broke a record. And he outbeat Nikki Haley and Joe Biden combined. That's what they aren't talking about. That's what they aren't showing folks. His actual sheer numbers tower over Nikki Haley and Joe Biden. Tower. But we can't talk about that, though.
So funny because you could say the same words and they can mean something completely different. Nikki Haley says, I'm not going anywhere. And the Trump folks are saying, you're not going anywhere. They're saying the same thing, but it's really, really different. My question to you is if she says in the near term, yes, when I raised my hand and said that I would vote for Trump even if he were convicted, can she be the leader of that faction? Do you have to pay that toll in order to be the leader of the faction?
I think it'll be really hard. And I should say, full disclosure, my wife used to work for Nikki Haley. I know Nikki Haley. I have no connection to her now. I think it would be really hard. It'd be really hard to say the things that she's been saying and then endorse him. But at the same time, like in 1976, Reagan ran, he didn't win, and he created a faction. That's the history of the GOP.
Yeah.
Is the team.
What do you think she says?
What
does she say tonight?
Their term next time.
What does Nikki Haley come out and say tonight?
I don't know. This sounds like fan fiction to me. I'm sorry. I just two things. One, I don't think there's anyone who is supportive of Trump right now that doesn't want to be there. I don't think that Tim Scott feels he's subjugating himself any more than Elise Stefanik does at CPAC right now. The era where there were people who kind of went along to get along to be in office is over. If you are on stage with Trump right now, I do think You are along because you want to be there. And Tim Scott has been performing a necessary action for Trump, who is always trying to show, I'm not that racist, right? That's like always the argument. And he represents that, just like Vivek Ramaswamy did. The other thing is we're looking at South Carolina like it's the same South Carolina from a years ago, even though it's had explosive growth from both red and blue states. Yeah. But Republicans from those states, which means the people who are going there are not the people who knew her before. And if anything, they're probably Trump supporters from other states. It's part of our cultural self-sorting. I don't think the rump state you're talking about of Republicans is just going to rise up this election. It sounds like it's a years-long project.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't think...
I'm not talking about anything for 2024. I'm talking about the future of the Republican Party.
Well, and Anderson, you asked like what Nikki Haley has to do tonight. I have to say, I'm hearing from my Republican sources who are basically saying, look, she now is potentially going to pay a price for staying in to her own political future, whatever that may be, especially if this is...
But didn't you hear people saying, we still like her, it's just not her time? I didn't hear people saying she's excommunicated.
If she stays in and continues to run against Trump, I think that there is going to be... I'm just picking up this sense that there are going to be more people...
Trump did himself.
Bingo. She said it right there. Nikki Haley's only hurting herself the longer she stays into this race. You know, there becomes a point of diminishing returns, and she's beyond that point. I believe she's beyond that point, right? She said that she needed to exceed 43. She didn't. She dropped below that. And I believe that is only going to go down the further we get into this thing. Her support against Trump. It's only going to crater the farther we get into this thing, which ensures that she will not be the candidate in 2028. Now, I'm sure she'll try to pop her head back up in 2028, but I don't think it's going to work. I think it will be Vivek's turn to run this show. That's just my humble opinion on it. Or maybe somebody else will pop up. Who knows? Maybe Byron Donalds decides to take a crack at it, or I don't know. Larry Elder decides to give a serious crack at it, which I don't think Larry Elder actually took a serious crack at it this time, but that's just my humble opinion on it. Because if you guys remember, he did actually enter the race for a second there, but he didn't stay in for very long. I like Larry Elder. We've checked out Larry Elder plenty up on this channel here. It's been a while since we checked him out, but shout out to Larry Elder. Okay. Who else? Here's a great question, and I'll end it with this. Who is someone that you think would be a great president in 2028 that isn't a name that's being said right now? You know, it's not a Vivek, it's not a Ron DeSantis, it's not a Nikki Haley, it's not, a Byron Donalds. It's not any obvious name, Tim Scott. You know, it's not an obvious name. It's not a Tulsi, right? It's not a name that's really being said. Who's that person? I'm genuinely curious to hear your answers of a name that isn't being said anywhere, where like no one's really talking about this person running for president. Let me know. I'm interested. I'm very, very interested. Very curious. But anyway, y'all let me know what you thought about this one in the comment section below. Like, share, comment. Hit that subscribe button before you go. Peace and love. I'm out.